Good evening, dear friends. My name is Angelina, and I'm going to moderate this session and the whole cycle of our events. Changing City in the Changing Climate. We'll start in several minutes, and I'm happy to introduce our participants. During the second half of 2021 and the beginning of 2022, we'll meet with the Russian and international experts. We'll speak about sustainable urban development. We'll meet with the theoreticians and practitioners, with people who work in the universities, academicians that research all the changes related to the climate changes, changed social partners, changed expectations of the citizens, how the cities should look like, and how we can participate in the changes in urban context. So the participation of citizenship is the topic of our discussion today. And today, Russian and German experts will talk to each other. The Russian participants, just like the first speaker of the session, is originally from Belarus and has experience in many post-Soviet countries. So I hope that she'll speak not only about Russia, but overall about the trends that take place in many regions of CIS countries. And now I would like to hand over my virtual mic to Nikita Tokarev, who is also a representative of March School, together with Bauhaus Weimar University and Friedrich Ebert Stiftung. So I'm a co-founder of the project from the Russian side, and Danilo from the German side. Unfortunately, she cannot be present today. We all came up with an idea to organize a series of discussions, and we try to implement it. Nikita, I hand over to you. Thank you very much, Angelina. I'm happy to greet all the participants and guests of our meeting. Francisca, I'm happy to see you here. Nadia, hello. It's very pleasant to see you again. So Angelina also said the most important things, and there's something I would like to add. There's a reason why this discussion today is especially dear to my heart. The topic of citizens' participation in urban changes, and here I mean not only citizens of cities, but also citizens of rural environment, their participation in environmental planning and urban planning. Well, this topic seems especially important to me, especially for Russia. I think that for Germany, this practice is already well developed, because it's a democratic country with sustainable democratic traditions. But here in Russia, this practice is only being developed gradually. If you think about what happened 5 years ago, we only started to go this way. And we understood that without the participation of the citizens, without the participation of the inhabitants of the cities, you cannot resolve any urban problems. So here it's really interesting to listen to the opinions from both sides. For Russia, for Belarus, perhaps the topic of co-participation, design, participation of citizenship in decision-making is the topic related to the formation of civil society. And you know that it happens differently in different regions, and it's not successful everywhere. So that's what we want to talk about today. And the second reason why this topic is very dear to my heart, and it's pleasant to me to start the topic. Angelina and Nadezhda are teachers at the program of territorial development. I think we did not have any meeting when we would be surrounded by dear friends, and these are the people with whom we develop our curriculum. Nadezhda, Angelina, thank you very much for all of your efforts. Okay, I hand over to Angelina. Let's start. Angelina, please feel free to start our discussion. Yes, I think that we can kick off. Thank you very much for your warm words and welcome remarks. Marsh Architectural School supports such a topic. We are people who have been dealing with sustainability and environmental issues for many years. Now, coming to our discussion, I would like to introduce our first speaker, and that is the senior researcher of the Institute of Regional and City Development from Dresden, Franziska Ennert. And Franziska is here with us. She has joined us from Dresden, if I'm not mistaken. So she will tell us about what happens in Germany in terms of participation, city participation, focusing on climate changes in the city. What is the situation like in Germany? Is it really good? Is the situation really well developed? Do you still face some problems and have some prospects for development? Thank you.
So thank you for this warm welcome, Angelina, and also thank you for inviting me to speak in this series and introduce our transdisciplinary research project, Tracing the City of the Future, Empowering Citizens, Transforming Cities. And you already see this notion of participation and change in cities in the title. And I want to take you back because this process in Dresden started in 2015, so it's already 6 years ago. And I want to take you to the point of where did we start and why did we even try to design such a research project in cooperation with citizens. So what we observe is that there's a big gap between knowledge and action also in Germany. These are data for the German population, survey provided by the German Environmental Agency. And what we see that there is a high level of environmental awareness among the general population. So these are data from 2020. And if people ask which topics concern them the most, then environmental and climate protection are rated fourth by the respondents. So 65% of all respondents give this a high priority. And here you also find the numbers for young people aged between 14 and 22. And also here we find a high level of environmental awareness where environmental and climate protection is rated as third priority among young people. However, if we look at what is actually done, we find that we consume far more resources than can be restored by ecosystems. The measurement of the overshoot day, which you can see here, measures when we have used the amount of resources that can be restored by ecosystems within the same period. And if we look at these numbers for Germany and for Russia, we would actually need 3 Earths to provide the amount of resources that we use every year. Another way to show this is by having these country-specific Earth overshoot days. So for Germany, this would be May 5th, and for Russia, it would be April 17th. And this is where we began. We thought there is the gap between the knowledge and the action, and we were wondering, how can this gap be bridged? So we began this process and wanted to explore which innovations in citizen participation and co-creation with citizens could help us to move from knowledge to action. And we wanted to learn how innovations in governance and urban experimentation can contribute to urban change and urban transitions towards sustainability. So we set out in 2015 to develop new forms of participatory governance. And we did so in cooperation with the city of Dresden as municipality. And as this quote says, one of our most underutilized resources today are the creativity and the good intentions of citizens. And we were wondering, how can we provide a new space for this creativity to unfold? And what we had in mind was to develop a new horizontal governance approach that is bottom-up and community-focused. So we wanted to shift this balance between governance from above and governance from below, and to create a new balance between top-down classical steering by hierarchy, that's also very formalized in the tradition of German urban governance, and the bottom-up engagement by citizens, which would bring new voices in and would promote innovative activities. So we designed this process to establish new collaborations between citizens, organized civil society, the municipality, the business community in the city, and academia. And what we try to do is to begin a joint process of urban experimentation to learn how transitions can actually be done and promoted in cities and communities. So we tried to adopt an approach of learning by doing. And this process was structured in 3 phases. And during the presentation, I want to take you through each of these. The first one was the phase of visioning, the second of planning projects to implement this vision, and then this was followed by the third phase of experimenting and implementing these project ideas. So why would we begin by building a vision for the future of Dresden in 2030 and beyond? As this Japanese saying says, vision without action is a daydream, and action without vision is a nightmare. So first, we invited citizens to join this dialogue. We had over 26 workshops over a year, where we literally invited them to draw their vision. So we gave them this worksheet you can see here. And on the left side, they had a blank page, and we invited them to draw what their vision would be. But of course, people engaging in these activities, they are not so used, if they're adults, they're not used to drawing anymore. So we also provided some guiding questions. You can see them on the left side, where we would ask them what their utopia or their dystopia for the future of the city would be. And from these exercises with these working sheets, a lot of ideas and images of the future of the city emerged. And we comprised these ideas and images provided by citizens into one vision. Now, this is a quite overwhelming picture. I'm aware of this, so I also invite you to have a closer look at it by looking at the project website. But we structure this by several levels of responsibility the citizens proposed, and they range from global responsibility over social and regional responsibility to the responsibility for your neighborhood and for yourself. I just want to give one example or show one element of this vision in a close-up. This would be the example of regional responsibility. So citizens were asked that the city and its structures of production and consumption should be transformed in a way that they are relocalized and that we can reach a high level of self-sufficiency in the city. So what is consumed in the city should also be produced in the city, be it food, be it energy, or other products. And now, having created this vision and having an idea of where we would want to go as a city, we entered the next phase, and that was the phase of planning. And so we invited the citizens to develop their own project ideas on how they would like to implement this vision. And again, we conducted many workshops, inviting citizens again to participate in the dialogue. And we provided worksheets. You can see an example here, where we asked them several questions about how innovative their project would be and how it can promote sustainability in the city and learning processes. And when we discuss sustainability, we as the academic partners, as researchers, introduce the notion of strong sustainability. And our argument was that priority should be given to ecological sustainability, because we need to respect and stay within planetary boundaries to preserve ecosystems. And therefore, it should be given priority over and defined as basis for social sustainability and economic sustainability. And then, having created this as a frame for all of the projects, we defined several criteria like sufficiency or resilience to guide the citizens in how they would develop their project proposals. So in the end of this planning phase, we received over 22 project proposals by project teams that were formed of citizens. And 8 of these proposals were then selected through an expert jury and a public voting procedure to then move on to the next phase and implement these citizen projects as transition experiments. So then we entered this phase finally of implementing these ideas and trying to learn from experimenting. These 10 transition experiments that are currently being implemented or have been implemented in the city are led by citizens and the municipality, and they cover topics like the edible city, the reduction of food waste, the co-creation of schoolyards as nature-based and living spaces. They try to promote citizen participation in urban districts, and they try to introduce sustainable business practices by cooperating with public corporations in the city. They try to test a car-free neighborhood in one of the districts, and they introduced a citizen laboratory for participation in the city hall. And I want to just give you some examples of these transition experiments so that you can see what ideas they promoted and how they implemented them. The first is the week of the good life. And following this or adopting this notion of the good life that has been introduced in the Latin American discourse, they do not only want to focus on mobility, but really on the quality of life and community building within the neighborhood and within the district. The idea was to create a car-free neighborhood for one day. So to have an intervention that would force people to change their mobility modes, but it would also invite them to use this public space that is created by being free of cars for other activities, to come together as a community, for instance, uses for urban farming or for common joint workshops to co-create products, recycle, repair items. And what they always did was that they had a strong emphasis on non-commercial activities, which should take place during this week. So it should not just be another street festival, but they try to find ways of how we can implement a sufficient lifestyle, and also to move away from the growth paradigm when we think about urban development. Now, it was a lengthy struggle for them to receive permission for such a mobility experiment, because also in the legal system in Germany, that was very difficult, and it required an amendment of the federal law on road traffic regulations, and only when that was in place, they could start this procedure of receiving a permission for this kind of mobility experiment. They finally received the permission in March this year, but then due to the pandemic, this week, this intervention could not be implemented in early May. They could only have an online event. But there is a project team now forming again, And we hope to gain new funding and to start this process anew, and hope to implement this intervention at some time in the future. Another example for one of these transition experiments is the food ban. They want to reduce food waste, but also revalue food as a resource. And they focus on education. So they do a lot of workshops to provide citizens with the knowledge and the skills on how to cook with leftover foods, but also with regional and seasonal produce. And as you can see, they already could save foods of an amount with over 2,000 kilograms. And they also installed so-called Verteiler in German, distribution stations for food in a place in front of the town hall, where people can bring leftover foods or take away foods that are there. And they had a lot of success with these activities. Another thing they did, or you can also see this in the picture, they use a cargo bike and they rebuild it in a way that it carries a kitchen, so that they are very flexible and can move around the city to different districts, to different organizations with this kitchen, and have these public cooking events as workshops to involve citizens and reach out to different communities in the city. And the third and final example for a citizen or a project I want to present today is the Citizen Laboratory. So this is situated within the town hall building, and it's supposed to be an intermediate space and a space for dialogue between citizens, the municipality, but also academia and the business community. And with this laboratory, also the city tries to build competences or know-how on which methods and tools to use to promote the participation of citizens, to promote the dialogue between the citizen projects and the departments of the public administration, and to collect this knowledge and competencies also within this space and the personnel that is involved in this process. Now, 5 years or 6 years of this participation process, 2 years of implementing citizen projects as experiments within the city. What have we learned from these processes? We observe, of course, that this has both potentials, but we also struggle with some challenges. So this approach of bottom-up governance could create new spaces for citizens to participate and co-create their city. It helped to empower them to a degree. And through their participation, the citizens introduced an alternative discourse that is to the predominant approach of ecological modernization and the transformation of the cities through technological innovation. They tried to break this up and show alternatives that would focus on sufficiency and post-growth, in contrast to commercial activities that are common in urban development. And this is shown by practices like the sharing of materials or the Week of the Goat Life, which emphasized non-commercial activities for this intervention. These experiments could also provide practical insights on how to adopt sustainable practices. So as seeing is believing, they help to create legitimacy for ideas like reducing food waste or nature-based solutions in schoolyards. Acting in a city, in districts and neighborhoods, supported the contextualization of these experiments and helped to integrate also the local knowledge of citizens in the process of developing innovations. This also supported the building of new identities and communities in the districts or in specific organizations. And as actors from public institutions, the private sector, and civil society literally speak different languages and have different working cultures and practices. Intermediaries prove to be crucial to translate between these actors, but also between the old of our classical ways of living and the new in terms of the social ecological innovations. And this required a combined effort of intermediaries acting from below, agents from civil society, and intermediaries supporting them from above, so heads of departments within the administration. However, there have been also a lot of challenges we encountered during urban experimentation. So administrative structures and procedures are still complex and they are very specialized. So citizens struggle to navigate them to get their course here. And for some, this also created a sense of disempowerment. We also observed limits of experimentation by civil society because the implementation of these projects requires professional expertise, legal knowledge on road traffic regulations, or knowledge on planning processes. But it also requires a lot of project management skills like accounting or team building. We also observed path dependency as governance paradigms like growth orientation or the principle of hierarchy proved to be very path dependent and strong. And the belief of economic growth and ecological modernization are still prevalent in the city, while this discourse on sufficiency and post-growth that the citizens tried to introduce remains still a niche discourse. We also found that the municipality has a strong orientation towards control and ensuring legal security, which often created a tension with this idea of experimenting, learning by doing, and embracing uncertainty and contingency, and creating open and flexible spaces. So that has always been in tension with the very law or legally based governance regime of German municipalities. And in order to gain legitimacy, the experiments need to prove their effectiveness and are expected to create results which can be ideally measured in quantitative terms. However, the impacts of these experiments are also often more intangible and invisible. They are, for instance, trust building, network building, learning practical skills like planting, harvesting local food, reusing materials. So then the impact or the effectiveness of these experiments has also often been questioned. And we encountered the challenge of how to move beyond experimentation as a short-term intervention, which is based on project funding, to create long-term transition pathways and to firmly establish these projects and integrate them in the organizations of the municipality. And local transitions are long-term processes which can last decades. And so we also need to find long-term structures to government so that we can really move beyond experiments as single interventions. And this ultimately means that we also need to alter these structures of research funding for these transdisciplinary projects to create a more long-term structure and perspective for the involved citizens. And having said this, I would like to conclude and thank you for your attention. And I also would like to invite you to have a look at the project website and get a closer look at these different citizen projects. Thank you.
Спасибо большое, Франциска.
Thank you very much, Francisco. You gave us a practical oriented presentation. We received some comments and questions from our audience, but for now, I would like to hand over to Nadezhda, and we will leave the questions for the final part of our discussion. Nadezhda is a participant of participatory design. So I hand over to you. Hello, dear colleagues. Can you hear me well? Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Thank you. I don't have any presentation with me, but I'm going to tell you, as Nikita said, I'm going to tell you about not only Russia, but also about Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, so post-Soviet countries. It's interesting that such instrument as co-participated design is used differently in 3 different countries because of different political conditions. And for example, in the Ukraine, it's a mechanism of pushing certain decisions in the city by politicians. And the deputies actively use it. But at the same time, in Ukraine, this instrument is widely used thanks to the project of public budget. And currently in Ukraine, there are 400 cities or even more that have joined the project. And there, this project the foundation for people to develop solutions that serve for the benefit of urban development. And now, speaking about Belarus, the situation is different there. If you organize a co-participation session there, you can end up in jail. So any meetings are actually banned. So in Belarus, nothing like that happens because of a serious political crisis. If you take Russia, I think Russia is a surprising country, and co-participation is supported at the federal level, meaning the competitions for small towns and historical settlements where without co-participation, it's not possible to get funding for the city development project. So I would like to express my gratitude to the project team that worked a lot in order to develop this system, where co-participation is a very important mechanism for balancing urban development. Right. I'd like to tell you that as far as co-participation in Russia is concerned, we do have some deviations and different understanding of the mechanism, but you have to take it philosophically. Why so? Because if we speak about sustainability, for sustainability, well, I mean, in order to understand how to resolve this or that problem, we need experience, and experience should be different. Only if you can reflect on it, you can understand what method is more efficient in this or that case. So thanks to gaining experience per today, you can do it. Yeah, here in Russia, it's about improvement of the cities, beautification of the cities, making the picture of the city beautiful. There are some demands that the citizens voice out to the designers, and they ask for their wishes to be taken into account. And it's also good. The experience is great, and it also brings some results, and it improves the level of co-participation, the level of common design, and the culture of common dialogue development, which is especially significant. At the same time, you need to understand that in Russia, we focus more on territorial improvement, landscaping, and beautification. But a few words about the understanding of growth. What do we actually understand under growth? We, in the majority of cases, mean economic growth, and post-Soviet citizens always think that growth is about building. If the city is growing, it means that new areas should appear. And it's also relevant for Belarus, by the way. So the cities become bigger, bigger, and bigger. And actually, it contradicts the economic or environmental agenda when we say that we need to decrease the level of consumption. And now we can speak about development. Development is not only about growth. Development is actually associated with a certain level. When we say stop, for now, we cannot grow anymore so fast. We have certain restrictions or limitations. So today, we actually speak about limitations for consumption. So cities should not expand and they should not become bigger. And there is a huge uh, discovery of the Architectural Bureau that says that the cities should not expand. When we speak about the development of the cities, we need to change their structures. And when we speak about the governance, then co-participation is a wonderful tool or instrument to understand what you already have in the city, to understand your material, feasible and non-feasible resources. There are non-material, non-feasible resources. There are people, there's network and the knowledge of people, their understanding how the city should develop, and the experience of using the city are especially important to efficiently develop the city. Let me give you some examples. This year, in 2021, I worked on the sustainable development of a small town, Pinsk, in Belarus. The population number is 30,000 people there. We saw that the city had great potential to develop a bicycle movement. 5% of population used bicycles there. For a town with 30,000 inhabitants, it's a great indicator. You have to remember that the understanding of how to develop this city in the administration and the understanding of how the city should develop among the citizens can be completely different. If you take Belarus, for example, the mental model of officials is strong that they cannot make mistakes, that they always should come up with right decisions. When you talk to them, you hear that their main message is everything is okay, everything is right, everything is correct. But once you start talking to the citizens, you ask what they want, you find out that the situation is not so perfect. The model of bicycle lane development in the city was like that. The city did not have much money, so the city wanted to develop the bicycle lanes step by step, giving it as a responsibility for investors. And each part of a bicycle lane was made in parts. One part was good, one part was bad, one part was good, one part was bad, and that did not bring comfort. People did not find it comfortable to use such bicycle lanes. So the wish of the citizens was so that when they do it like that, it's not comfortable for us. And we actually do not want to use bicycles more often. We don't want to use bicycle lanes like that. Just make one bicycle ring road, which we could use to go from one object to another in the city. The inhabitants had their experience, so they showed us where the critical points were, where the bicycle lane should go. So on the basis of that dialogue, we understood that it's possible to spend money once per year in order to build 5 kilometers of a bicycle lane, or you can make 10 or 15 kilometers of a bicycle lane. So you can either build 5 kilometers of a regular road or 15 kilometers of bicycle lane. The amount of money is the same, but the results are completely different for the development of the city. This is how, with the help of participation, you can learn more about the experience of citizens, and citizens can tell you how to do it better. On the other hand, the citizens can share their wishes with you. So with the help of co-participation, you get connection. I mean, when government starts to listen to the users of the city. And this is what Francisca meant when she gave her presentation. This is called a well-balanced system. You have an action and you have feedback, and with the help of feedback, you know how to balance the situation and how to make sure that it is as efficient as possible. Right now, I just want to draw your attention to the following. In our mindset in post-Soviet countries, development is always related to growth. More, and more of everything, bigger, bigger, and bigger. But Francisca was absolutely right to say that co-participation is about knowledge too. So you have to educate people. And we speak about the special model of learning when a user, a citizen, has an opportunity to get a completely different experience, and that person can think about it and change his or her habits. So the everyday life changes. What does that mean? Right now, I want to tell you about sustainable mobility in Pinsk. So we made a part of a bicycle lane there, but bike sharing came to the city. It's called Kolobike, and it was a person, so it was a private entrepreneur. It was a person who took a franchise and started to develop bike sharing there. People started to have an opportunity not simply to buy a bicycle, but they had an opportunity to pay a certain amount of money to share it and try it. So with the help of bike sharing, citizens tried it, they get that experience, they found out what it was like to use a bicycle to go from home to work on an everyday basis, and imagine on the next day they sold more bikes in the next month, and the amount of bikes sold was like the amount of bikes sold during the whole season, and they did it only within 1 month. On the basis of experience gained, people changed their habits. People changed their mobility habits, and they started to use bicycles more. That is all about experience development. Yeah, and one more thing that I would like to cover today, Francisco also spoke about it. We have it here in Russia too. And that is that there is a mindset from post-Soviet times that we have no right to make mistakes. So when we speak about development, when you need to reflect on the models and approaches you had, you get experience and you reflect on it. No one can tell us if the experience was right or wrong. And I guess that it's time for us to no more categorize our experience as right or wrong, because wrong experience, or what we call wrong, is like a step for us. We step on it and we come closer to more efficient solutions. Frankly speaking, when I talk to my colleagues in post-Soviet countries, they all say that we have outdated standards for design, for example, but in addition to that, we inherited the mental model that we have no right to make a mistake. That is a big contradiction to the idea of experience gaining. Our colleagues from co-participation field feel really pressed because they are pioneers, you know. And speaking about post-Soviet countries, people who take part in co-participation, those who practice it, well, they're real pioneers. But don't be afraid to lower your level in terms of short-term results. Sometimes you just cannot give short-term results right here and right now. So I'd like to speak about my experience. Once at the panel discussion, I said that if you have to work at developed territories, it's easier than to design new districts. And that was a discussion with architects and urban developers. I received a lot of critics there. They told me, how come? That's not so. And they said it's much easier to design new districts. Yeah, on the one hand, so in short-term perspective, it's really easy to start from scratch. You have tools, you have your technical and economic indicators, so it's easier to design everything from scratch. But you cannot say what processes will take place there, and will they be the way the designers plan them. But if it's already a developed territory, it's easier to work there because you can learn it, you can study it, you can understand what resources are available there. I mean, material, non-material resources, non-feasible resources, what people live there, what resources they have. You can understand business that is available there and what business can go there, what pedestrian flows you have there. So for long-term perspective, it's much easier to work at developed territories because it's easier to program it. You already have the interested parties and the actors, people who live there, and they can stay there and develop it. They're more interested to work in that territory because they feel that they can make their contribution for the development of the territory. Right, so co-participation. This is the topic of our discussion, and we need to decrease the bar and of our expectations. So we need to change our habits, even at the level of design, meaning that development is not about bigger, larger. It's about a new understanding of the city as an ecosystem with a lot of resources. So instead of attracting additional resources, we need to thoroughly learn what resources are available in the city. And here I mean feasible and non-feasible resources, people included. And then based on that, we can design and develop the systems that will be environmentally friendly, that will form a new mindset and the new culture of minimum consumption. And it's necessary to do it step by step, of course. In addition to that, I'd like to tell you that in addition to bottom-up initiatives, it's necessary to have support at the federal level and at the regional level when there are laws that you can use to support your activity. For example, we develop a network of special places where garbage is collected because we have a legitimate program. So it's written in the law. So sometimes you have to bring the polarized approaches together, the approaches of the administration and the approaches of people living in the territory and actually developing it. Yeah, I think that this is the main thing that I wanted to tell you. That was my main message. In Russia, we have conditions for the development of co-participation and environmental co-participation included. I would say the conditions are quite favorable. Yeah, we inherited a lot of bad mental models that serve as an obstacle for our development. That's true. But on the other hand, we had quite a lot of prerequisites to change the situation. Yeah, in addition to that, I'd like to say the following. Francisca told us about participation when it's possible to change the territory completely, to get new experience, to live in the territory differently. So speaking about the cities, you need to remember about the budget, and you need to invest money in it. Yeah, in short-term perspective, administration sometimes don't want it because they think that it's too expensive. But in long-term perspective, when we speak about long-term benefits and advantages, then yeah, it is efficient. But today it's quite difficult to organize, at least here in Russia. And I would say it's a tool which is being discussed. But for now, we can use dialogues, visualizations, and renders of future spaces. So we use more visions than actual experience gaining. But that is also important for making proper choices. Thank you. Thank you, Nadia. Dear friends, we have several questions in the chat, but maybe before we move on to the questions, I'd like to ask Nadezhda and Francisca, do you have any comments to each other's presentations, maybe?
I would have a question for Nadezhda, because of course, Dresden is also a part of a post-communist context or environment. We only transitioned this system as a democratic transition more than 30 years ago. And back then, I mean, it was not a choice to live a sufficient lifestyle, but it was inherent in the economic system, and due to the scarcity, people were forced to live this way. And with a lot of projects we do now, the practices they try to reintroduce, they were everyday practices more than 30 or 40 years ago. For instance, recycling material, reusing materials, repairing items. These were common practices back then. So I wanted to ask, well, are we reinventing the wheel in a sense? And how do you see this in the context of post-Soviet cities?
Вопрос, пожалуйста, можно?
Do you have any question, or was it just a comment? Do you have any specific question, or to Nadezhda?
It would be the question of, yes, how, to what extent are these practices the part of everyday life in post-Soviet cities, or is it a situation where I think they would need to be reintroduced? To what extent could you build on previous knowledge still?
Ну, смотрите, конечно, мы не
Well, of course, we have not only knowledge from post-Soviet times. Yeah, first of all, I'd like to go back to the topic of growth and development. And I told you that development happens when you reach a certain limitation. So in terms of Russia, when you have too many resources, you think that you want to develop endlessly. And the only thing that can stop you is the level of pollution. When you understand that actually manufacturing takes place, production takes place, but it all has a negative impact on the urban pollution. So we speak about cities and the development of ecosystem of the whole country in general. So it's not about scarcity of resources for Russia, because we have a lot of resources here. It's more about the impact on environment in the city and outside of the city. And we have the plan of sustainable mobility. You know, sometimes pollutions in the city is caused more by cars than by industrial facilities. In Belarus, for example, 90% of pollution comes from cars and only 10% comes from industrial facilities, right? And in Russia, I think it's not a question about scarcity of resources. It's more a question about consequences for cities and for the ecosystems and environment around the cities. Well, we use different practices, of course, like prototyping, getting new experience that helps us revise our habits, our way of living. Well, I don't spend so much time here in Russia to speak about it in details, but in comparison to Belarus, where we have this system of separate waste collection, here in Russia, it doesn't exist. On the one hand, I was shocked, like how come they don't have separate waste collection, but on the other hand, they have a good network of points for separate waste collection. If you separate it at home, then you can bring the separated waste to these points. Yeah, plus I can see that there is cooperation between different actors that deal with sorting of waste. They cooperate with business. For example, you can bring batteries, sorted waste, and you get certain benefits. You can get discounts in business, for example. And it's not only about preferences and benefits, but you have a better image of a person that takes care of the planet. For now, the situation is like that. Yeah, I would like to add something from my side to answer your question, because I think that over the last period of time, we have had more and more initiatives and in various formats in Russian cities. In some cities, it's about sharing economy development of sharing when people can share something or use something in a common way. In some other cities, it's more about separate waste collection and transportation of fractions to recycling companies. There's a non-profit organization which is called Separate Waste Collection. It works in many Russian cities where there's municipal system of governance, and they try to create their system of waste collection. In other cities, there are initiatives when bars and cafes come together, and you can take out from one bar, and you take this cup and you can give it to another bar once you finish your drink. We have a lot of initiatives that focus on the decrease of packaging, less amount of tableware. Because of coronavirus, of course, it's corrected, but we can see that such initiatives appear in Russia. Then we develop here the stores without packages, where you can buy food without packages. Perhaps I have forgotten about something, but for now, this is what comes to my mind. Yeah, great. I think we can move on. We have received some questions, and the first question is to Nadezhda. In St. Petersburg, they don't like when people take part in co-participation design. Do you think that it's possible to have such a participation design, to have a public process, and to push the government to listen more attentively to the wishes of the citizens? Thank you very much, Gulnaz, for your question. And here I would like to share the experience of Belarus, how they can influence the decisions of the administration of the government. And usually it works like that. If there's a project which happens secretly and the citizens are not happy about it, so citizens organize their own PR campaign. If they can develop their own project and they say where the officials did not hear them and did not comply with the wishes. And in Belarus, if officials are criticized in mass media, they are afraid of it. So it's a good leverage. And this is a mechanism that they can use in order to influence the city development. For example, we had a story like that. There was a small park in the city. Around the park, there were a lot of houses, and they wanted to destroy the park. So citizens came together, and I always say that art is the most powerful instrument in order to pass your message. So with the help of art interventions and with the help of a message to the president, so through art interventions and messages, they finally managed to get the park, and they decided not to build anything in that park. The park remained. So if you create a strong PR campaign, if you raise a lot of information noise around the project, then you can have influence on it from the side of the citizens. But at the same time, I guess that instead of having a conflict, it's better to find insiders. This is what I understood from my experience in working with administration. You need to find a point of entry, a person in the government who can hear you, who can understand why you actually do it. So you know that it's always important to stay friendly, amicable, benevolent. I guess that that is the most important conditions. Never escalate the conflict, but always try to pass your message to the representatives of the government so that they understand your position. On the one hand, I say that it's better not to escalate the conflict, but on the other hand, I'd like to tell you about another initiative in Ukraine, where thanks to the public budget, the citizens managed to fight for the embankment. They found out that they were going to construct 18 high-rise buildings on the embankment, and citizens got angry, truly angry. For some time, they tried to act through lawyers to prove that the embankment was a public territory and the city didn't have an opportunity, didn't have the right to build there, but they started to build there, and the citizens understood that it couldn't be so. So they decided to destroy the fence. Shootings took place, and one of the activists, Elena Medvedenko, said, "Dear colleagues, you shouldn't be against it. You should find a project that you would advocate for." So they found a small piece there, which was a public territory, and through public budget project they developed a project there of a small park. It's a skate park, and through that skate park they started to prove that it was necessary for the territory to remain public. They decided to prove that they need the territory, they need it in the shape like that, and then the city bought a part of the embankment back and organized a park there. It's a success story when non-confrontation, when you're not against something but you're for something, brought to good results. Yeah, that's my answer. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nadezhda. Francisco, is there anything you would like to add to this topic? Maybe you have some experience from Germany related to it?
Well, yes, Nadezhda just raised these issues of intermediaries and providing structured entry points into the public administration. And we also found that that was really important and crucial because as I mentioned also in the presentation, the public administration is very specialized and complex in its structure. And that made it very, very difficult for the citizens to understand whom they were supposed to speak to and whom they were required to involve in their project to get, for instance, a legal permission or to organize a planning process. And during this process of the Dresden City of the Future office has been established in the public administration as such a new intermediary organization. And the employees of this office, they also had to learn and adapt to this role of being this intermediary and translating between the citizens and their regards and these working logics and the formal and legal procedures of the administration, and also helping them to more or less navigate these complex organizational structures, which levels of hierarchy and to involve, which agencies or the specialized departments and to involve in these processes. So these we learned also that these intermediaries, they need to be firmly established as an organizational unit, but it's not only about the structure, it's also about the mindset and about the practice of developing a different culture of open communication between public administrations and citizens. And what we also learned and was interesting insight from that process is that frequently when this office, City of the Future, when these intermediaries and moderators brought the citizen projects and different administrative departments or agencies together, that was not only to promote better understanding or communication between the citizens and the municipality, but also among the public agencies, because so often there is also this lack on coordination on these horizontal topics like sustainable urban development within the municipality. So we have to think about these intermediaries and also taking this idea a step further, that is this idea of the citizen laboratory. We also need to create spaces, really dialogue spaces, to try experiment with something and experience it to learn from that.
Можно я, пожалуйста, отвечу?
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to answer something. Francisco, thank you so much. Actually, I always speak about similar things during my course and the program. I always ask my students to say that a city is a resource, any territory is a resource. If in terms of environment, we say that we cannot consume endlessly the way we do it now. We cannot use the same amount of resources in the future. And in the city, it's also the same. Any urban territory is a resource to satisfy the needs of a big number of people, right? So here, co-participation, the model of co-participation where open dialogue is possible, it's one of the prototypes of how you can agree on using resources of the planet in the future, meaning that urban territory is limited. We have a lot of wishes coming from different citizens, that's true. But with the help of co-participation in urban territories, you get experience, you learn your lessons, and on the basis of that, you can understand how you can agree on things and use resources in a conscious way. Yeah, that's my additional comment. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I think it's a great remark and a wonderful comment. Dear friends, we have one more question from the chat. It's a comment, rather, maybe it's a question too. It's a question from Saratov. Where the situation is quite difficult because several chemical enterprises continue to work there. They pollute the air. There is an abandoned facility where they keep former industrial waste. They don't recycle it. Sometimes it burns. We also have problems with fires around the city. We take part in public hearings, but unfortunately, it's very difficult to pass our message to the public administration. How can we push our ideas? Well, Nadezhda says, may I start if you don't mind? Accidentally, luckily, it happens so that I work in the project group 8, And we have a project to develop the embankment of the lake near the city of Karabakh. In Karabakh, they have one of the oldest metal facilities, and it created an environmentally hazardous zone. Karabakh is the city which is located close to the national park, Taganai. But despite the fact, the problems are still there. I read a lot of documents about protected natural territories and biosphere protected zones in Russia. So it's interesting to see that the world community have come up with the following. On the one hand, they say it's necessary to create reservoirs, like territories where nothing is possible. You just preserve the nature there. So you have islands of nature. But it led to a situation when biological diversity decreased because animals have no understanding of borders of protected territory. They migrated. So it happened that in one places nature was untouched and in other places it was possible to destroy the nature. So basically they decided not to use the model and they decided to use biosphere territories. So there are different classifications there where you have the nuclear of the protected zone, then you have buffer zone where it is possible to have settlements or cities. This zone is called a buffer zone, meaning that people can live there, environmental excursions can take place there, environmental tourism is possible. And the third zone is the zone of cooperation. And in zone of cooperation, you can have developments, agriculture, cities can be located there. Why? Buffer zones were created in order for people to learn how to use resources of the territories in such a way that you do not harm the nature. You can expand the territory of biosphere territories. There are not so many of them around the globe. As far as I know, there are about 350 of them. I think it's not much, but it's also a good prototype and story, meaning that different stakeholders should know how to agree on things. There's growth and there's development, and they contradict. When you develop things, you come to a certain limit and you have to rethink the way you consume your resources because you cannot consume them the way you did. Speaking about biosphere protected zones, it's a great experience and you can use it for development of cities. A city is not as an independent unit. A city is a part of nature. City and nature are interconnected for sure. So, to my mind, in order to push the message, you need to have an interdisciplinary approach. You need scientists and environmental experts. So one of the tasks to create biosphere protected zones is to have a scientific base, meaning that you get a scientific foundation and researchers monitor the territory from the ecological point of view to understand its state. Then you have the data, and once you have the data, you can use the data in order to speak about the state of the city and the state of the territory around it, saying that this is where we live, this is what we have, this is what conflict we have. So this is how it harms our health, for example, or nature. And when we speak about health, it's also great because health is the right of each person. This is like a basic right that should be respected. And we can say that the state doesn't follow the fundamental rights and doesn't respect the right of people for health. Because there's this contradiction. But, you know, data are needed. You need data to prove it. to prove that you are in a hazardous situation. Yeah, and a strong instrument is mass media. When you bring up the noise in mass media, when you tell the story in a proper way, then yeah, it's also a way to push the situation. It can help you influence the decision-making process. I try to give you an answer. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Nadezhda, there's another question to you. You spoke about the G8 group. Is it related to urban development? Did we understand you correctly? No, it's not G8. It's called the Project Group 8. There's no difference between urban development and environmental development. Urban development as a science is a science that speaks about the correlation between different systems in the city. It studies how they influence each other and how they work together. So environment is a part of it, is a part of urban development. It doesn't come separately. Yeah, and at the very beginning of my presentation, they say that G8 is a project group. Yeah, at the beginning I told you that in Russia it's more about beautification, development of cities in terms of beautification, territorial improvement. In Russia, you have good conditions to focus not only on beautification, but also on co-participation in order to decrease consumption, to change the paradigm from growth to a new paradigm, which says that we have cities, we have internal resources, and with the help of co-participation, we can get better results. Co-participation is a wonderful tool in order to have a cross-cutting of resources, to understand the resources better, and on the basis of that, you can develop the city. You can attract less external resources and use more internal resources. Yeah, this is how I wanted to explain it. Yeah, thank you very much, Nadezhda. Dear friends, on my behalf, I would like to react to a question which was about Saratov and environmental problems in the city of Saratov. Yeah, the problems are truly topical, and you told us about the existing chemical facilities and abandoned facilities that continue to bring harm to environment. So these are two different topics. And plus you raised the topic of Volga River pollution. I think that the optimal way would be to work on different levels. On one level, you can try to think how public activists can take part in environmental ecology project because it focuses on Volga cleaning, on air cleaning. Saratov is not listed there as a city with the most polluted air, but you can have a look at this project and try to check what people implement the project in your region. And second, you can try to organize a large-scale mass campaign, mass media campaign through. You can talk to bloggers, to journalists, people from different levels at regional and federal level. You can make campaigns in social media, so attract supporters, make sure that the information is more available to public at large. And then on the basis of that, you can understand what people you can inspire with it. You can make noise about the story, because in Russia, yeah, noise works and the involvement of a large number of people who are willing to resolve the problem. Right, and you can have a look at some public councils, what you can do about national project ecology, because definitely this is similar to your topic. Yeah, have a look at national project ecology. Yeah, that's my comment from my side. And then we have a question from Samarska region. Samara region, yeah, not Saratov, Samara region, Talyati. Yeah, okay, we understand it. Yeah, you can have a look at your region and what national projects are available there. So I would like to finish our speech and our presentation. Nadezhda and Francisco, you can say some final remarks, and then we will close our meeting. Nadezhda says, I would like to continue to the topic of Tolyatti city. Usually, it all works like that. In any case, in order to start a campaign, you have to find people who think the same. You have to develop a community. And usually you can do it on the basis of values. You can find common thinkers on the basis of values. Why do you think that this topic is important, and that could be your value? And second, you have to be guided by certain principles. Second, I'd like to tell you that it was pleasant for me to see that we have quite a lot of federal and regional programs that support environmental initiatives. So it's necessary to find people that implement the programs from the side of administration or government. They can help you, and you can synchronize different projects, and it's better to focus them in the right way. Sometimes they are located at different levels, but once you started them and bring them together, if you focus them on one problem and you have community of people that share your values and you have impact on mass media, with the help of all that, you can push a lot of questions. But it's necessary to focus your efforts. That is my comment from my side. Right. Summarizing our discussion, I'd like to tell you that it brings me joy here in Russia that co-participation is actually used, and that is already valuable. We get experience and we can reflect on it. You need to find time to stop, or you need to have colleagues that can stop for a while and analyze what experience was efficient. But please never say the experience was bad, because sometimes if you say so, people leave the industry. On the one hand, I'd like to tell you that we need to be more careful, not only in terms of nature, but also it's necessary to inspire each other to continue our work and to develop the instruments and approaches of co-participation. That is my warm message to you. And it's quite positive, I believe. Yeah, thank you very much, Francisca.
Yes, thank you very much also for your thoughts, Nadezhda. And to give a brief roundup or a summary of our discussion, what we see as very strong obstacles are these path dependencies within our society on how we organize our economy, but also our mindsets and growth, economic prosperity. And these are also very strong in German society. And so if we think about transforming cities, we need to think also about transforming urban governance in the moods of how cities are governed, and citizens can participate in these processes to open up these mindsets and redefine our values, but also our structures and practices. And using this approach of experimentation by citizens, we try to promote this culture of learning by failing. We try to see that we need to be more flexible and create these open spaces so that we can really try things and learn by experience, so that we do not only have a dialogue or discussions on this very abstract conceptual level, but that also we involve citizens by providing an experience for them and doing something in practice as another way of reaching out to people. And I hope we can, develop this approach further. But it's also something new in the German traditional urban governance system.
Спасибо большое, Франциска. Если можно, вам краткий
Thank
финальный
you.
вопрос.
Thank you very much, Francisca. We have one question in the chat to you. in the city experiments that you told us about, can the owners of the buildings participate, or people who rent spaces can also take part in them?
Yes, it's an open participative process. Anyone who wants to propose a project can do so. The condition is that it needs to be connected to a legal entity. So this would be, in Germany, we have this civil society associations. These are the legal entities. And this is the requirement because all these experiments receive public funding from either the federal ministry or the municipality. And in order to receive this funding, it needs to be connected to this associations. And so this is why it's open to everybody to propose, but they always need to connect to organized civil society to actually be able to apply for such a project and implement it.
Спасибо. Спасибо за ответ. Ну что, друзья, наше мероприятие подошло к концу.
Thank you very much for your answer. And I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers, the Architectural School of March, Bauhaus Institute in Weimar, Friedrich Ebert Foundation. I would like to express my gratitude to Daniela, my co-founder. Unfortunately, she couldn't be present here. Thank you, Nadezhda. Thank you, Francisca, for your speeches and presentations. Dear friends, let's stay in touch. Thank you very much and have a good evening. Bye-bye.